Welcome to Routing for Success, the show where we interview today's top logistics professionals, giving them a platform to share their stories and best practices. Today we are talking with Darrius Peoples. Darrius is a linehaul contractor with FedEx Ground, but he also runs an over-the-road trucking company under his own authority and a garbage disposal business. The timing couldn't be more appropriate to talk about some of the differences and trade-offs between running trucks inside or outside of the FedEx Ground network, since the trucking industry is in the midst of one of the worst downturns in recent memory. From a Bloomberg article published 4 days ago on May 19th, for truck drivers and larger carriers, the current business environment may be headed to a worse place than the one reached during the depths of the great financial crisis. Per-mile rates have been plunging since the COVID-era goods boom brought a surge of new supply onto the market. Combine that with higher maintenance prices and an increased cost of capital and other difficulties in operating, and the result is a brutal mix for a notoriously cyclical industry, one that has the potential to be worse than the famous trucking downturns experienced in 2019 and in 2009. Okay, many linehaul contractors within FedEx Ground ask whether it makes sense to get their own authority to run trucks outside of FedEx. Despite what Bloomberg says, it's not all bad all the time, and there are some significant advantages to being able to seek work outside of the FXG network. Just like anything, there are trade-offs. Here to tell us more about the differences between the two models, I give you Darrius Peoples. All right, we are here with Darrius Peoples. He is president of DXP Group, DPT Logistics, and also has a garbage disposal company in South Jersey called Daisy Disposal. Darrius, thanks for being here with us.
Hey, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we had previously spoken with your business partner, Rick Dunn. Actually, we've had, by the time that this episode comes out, we'll have released 2 separate episodes with Rick. And in each of those, he mentioned his business partner, his 50-50 partner, Darrius. And so I told him, hey, man, we've heard your side of the story, Rick. We need to talk to Darrius also. But I really appreciate you coming on. And you're involved in the Linehaul FedEx business, and you have your own authority to do trucking outside of FedEx. And that's a topic that I think a lot of people tuning in are going to be very curious to hear about, to compare and contrast the two. So thanks again for coming on.
No problem.
Before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself. What was your professional background before you'd ever even heard of FedEx and trucking?
My first adult job, honestly, was I was in the military. I was in the United States Air Force, active duty. I was a security forces guy, so the MP. We did some really cool stuff. I had some fun in my youth. So I'm a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. I left the military and I immediately went to federal law enforcement. That's where I met Rick. I was an air marshal there for another 10 years. And at some point during that time, we just stumbled into trucking. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service, first of all.
You're welcome.
So in talking with Rick, I think that he had mentioned that you acquired your first FedEx run in 2014. First of all, how did you even hear about FedEx? It's kind of a strange little corner of the logistics world, FedEx contracting. How did you hear about it?
Well, me and Rick have a mutual buddy who was an air marshal as well. He just told me, he said, hey, I'm going to sell up my real estate. I'm going to cash out my retirement. I'm going to buy FedEx runs. And I said, you can't buy FedEx runs, which is what everybody says. And we talked about it for about 20, 30 minutes. And he said, I'm doing it. So I said, no, I want in too. And then me and Rick were in an operation at the airport, a blacked out Suburban, and we were just bored. And I said, hey, Rick, I'm buying FedEx runs. This is for the burbs. And at this point, I'm the expert. And he said, you can't buy FedEx runs. And I said, oh, yes, you can, man. So to wrap it up and make a long story short, the other guy didn't follow through. Rick had a roommate or something who knew a manager, who knew another manager. And Rick came into work 2 days later and he said, we're getting some runs for free. I said, they're not free. They're millions of bucks. And lo and behold, we got 2 unassigned runs in Woodbridge randomly. Just like that. Two runs. And then I didn't believe it. And I went up and met the guy myself, the regional manager. I remember his name, but I'll keep it off of here. And he said, yeah, I'll give you guys 2 runs. 2 cops, veterans. We like your story. Hey, get 2 runs. And this is before all this whole lead, all these meetings, and before my ground biz was a thing. We used to get the runs out on paper, so I could see how this was able to get done. At this point, almost 10 years ago.
So you were awarded the runs. You almost didn't believe it, but it was legit. What were the next steps? You had to go figure out what trucks to buy and where to buy them from, and how to hire drivers and how much to pay them, because you didn't have any background in this stuff at that time, right?
No. My father is he's a truck driver. He's a truck driver, not like an over the road guy or something like that. At this point, he'd only been driving trucks several years, maybe 10 or so. He's not a lifelong driver, but he works for a big construction company in New York City, and he was driving roll-off trucks and trucks. So I had a little bit of the knowledge and the vernacular, if you will. I'm pretty hands-on, pretty handy, so I could pick up the stuff pretty quick. So I said, hey, Dad, we got these runs for free. What do I do? And he said, well, how are you going to run the runs? I said, oh, shit. See my language. I said, we need trucks, right? So Rick was like, where are we getting trucks from? I was like, I don't know. And then, I just drove past like a busted up Ryder used truck lot. And I saw these 3 Columbias, Freightliner Columbias. I called my dad. I said, Dad, should I buy these with a Fuller and a Detroit Series 60? And he said, yeah, those are good trucks. Buy them. They're good starter trucks. They're going to be the F-150s of trucking. Get the job done. Got some crappy loans. I still remember to this day, $85,000 for 3 Freightliner day cabs. And we didn't know how to finance them. So we got some crappy financing, decent trucks. And so from June to probably November, it took us to put all this stuff together. So what Rick can put together in 2 weeks, we strung it together in 4 or 5 months, because we were learning how we as we went along. So, as you know, there's a whole C number, V number, workers' comp, payroll accounts, banking. We didn't know anything. There was no consultants. Me and Rick never owned a business with employees, so we didn't know how to set up payroll accounts and things like that. And we just did it. That's how it happened.
And just to clarify, $85,000 for 3 day cabs. Was that $85,000 total for the 3, or was it $85,000 a piece?
This is 2014, not 2023. So this is when you could buy a truck with a credit card. It was none of this nonsense now where trucks are 3 times what they should be worth, or 2, definitely double. These trucks are going for double what they should. Most times. These were compliant trucks. There was no FCAM. They were just workhorses. Really workhorses.
Okay, so you got your first trucks. What about hiring drivers? How did you learn that process?
So I'm 42 now. I was 32 when we started this. So me and Rick were just 2 31 and 32-year-old guys, different from the folks that were in the terminal. And we would just go up there, man. We'd just go to the terminal and talk to people, and we think people like this, and we just ask questions, like, hey, so we found out one of the admins who does the processing. She was really cool. And we just said, hey, how are the rest of the contractors, how are they getting drivers? And she was like, just put an ad on Indeed. Don't worry about it. So Indeed became our friend. We put an ad on Indeed, got 3 or 4 or 5 applicants, figured out if they met the FedEx criteria, hired one, and he started driving, put him through the first advantage. Well, it wasn't even first advantage. It was a human, a human did it, but they'd have to go physically walk into the terminal with your contractor or someone, and sit down and do the process right there with a FedEx and that's what we did.
So you were working full-time as an air marshal during your entry into FedEx. You had told a story a few moments ago about how you and Rick were spending a lot of time just sitting in a blacked out Suburban at an airport. When I think of an air marshal, and again, I don't have any background, in law enforcement or military. So when I think of an air marshal, I think of someone in plain clothes on an airplane that looks indistinguishable from everyone else, and they're there just to provide security. But it sounds like there's other aspects to it also, that you were spending a little bit more time close to where you live. Is that right?
Yeah. So initially, no. I mean, yes, we hatched this idea while we were on ground-based missions. So if there was a tactical team, if you will, this would have been the closest team to it in the agency. We weren't like SEAL Team 6 or anything like that, but you got to wear the gear, so you got to look cool. So exactly what you said, the job itself was undercover or from an inconspicuous nature. I don't want to say clandestine, but like you said, if you're on an airplane and you're plain clothes, that was 90% of the job. So they would have these ground-based details wherever the field offices were at, and they would focus on transportation hubs called Viper teams. So me and Rick were on the Viper teams, and we'd go around New York City to different sites, the airports being one of them, just providing a visual deterrent to terror. That's why we were on the ground.
So how much time were you spending away? And I guess the reason I'm asking this is because, starting out something completely brand new in an area that you didn't really have any experience in, which is trucking, that is difficult in of itself. But to have to do that when you're not even there a lot of the time, that sounds extremely difficult. So, like, how much did you have time to spare where you could just go to the FedEx terminal and try to meet people and pick their brain and learn about the industry? And how did you square that against your time commitments to your full-time job as an air marshal?
So for me, being an air marshal was my dream job, right? I always knew I was in Pakistan in 2001. And they came up with the air marshals, and I said just out loud, as soon as I get out the military, I'm going to be an air marshal. 10 years later, I became an air marshal, right? And I lived in South Jersey, and I would commute to Queens, New York, about 2-hour commute to go to the airport or to the office, and I would drive right past the terminal. So I would try to squeeze in whatever I needed to do during my commute, if I could. So commute there, commute back. Now there's some stuff, some stories we're going to tell later, probably when we write our own book, where we have a 3-hour podcast, where we really got into the terminals and stuff like that, and really got the information we needed, for sure.
Could you tell us one of those stories? What's an example of a time where you really got into the terminal and gleaned something valuable?
Well, I'll tell you, when we came up in this, it was the Wild Wild West. You go here now, they're like prisons, and security is like TSA screening. When we started, that stuff just started. So there was no fences, no nothing, and you just walk right in it, for most of the facilities. So Woodbridge, for one, we knew the terminal was there. We knew we were getting started, and we would just go up, say, yeah, we're here for so-and-so. They'd say, go ahead. We just walk right in, and if all else fails, maybe we say, hey, we're cops and we're here to see so-and-so.
It's funny that you mentioned that. So I started with this company in 2011 and working with FedEx contractors, trying to finance, trucks for them. And I've experienced what you were just talking about firsthand. In 2012, there was a new truck that came out called the Isuzu Reach. And this isn't a Linehaul thing. It's a small pickup and delivery truck. But I toured all over Florida, the state of Florida, going terminal to terminal, trying to show this truck and introduce myself to people. And yeah, you're right. Things were just kind of starting like that. There were some stations where they let me just walk right in, and they said, yeah, pull the truck in. You can even pull it inside the building. No problem. Have you talk to people. Mm-hmm. And then there was another one where they said, no, you cannot come onto the property. And so I parked at the entrance of the property, and I'm there a few minutes, and I see this woman walking toward me with these two big guys on either side of her. And they look like they're ready to kick my ass. And they come over And she's like, hey, who are you? What are you doing? And I mentioned who I am and what I'm doing. I'm here just trying to show this truck and introduce myself. And she says, oh, you're good. I thought you were with the Teamsters Union. Yeah, you're good. Anyway, okay, so
it's a thing. That's a thing.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, so you got started. You were talking to people, learning the business. Let's fast forward to today, just to give a little bit of context as to how far you've come in the past 10 years or so. Tell us about your business today. How many trucks do you have running with FedEx? And if you could tell us how many of those are assigned versus unassigned. And then you also have your own authority. So you run trucks outside of FedEx as well. I'd like to talk about that. Just tell us a little bit about your business today.
Yeah, today it's actually very I won't say fragmented, but segregated. So DXP Group started as an offshoot of Done Peoples Trucking, but that became our FedEx arm. So at one point we probably had like 35 FedEx runs or something like that. And I think by the time we really got rid of some of the junk, and the stuff that was just not performing, we probably had around 12 or 15. And I think today we're probably around a dozen or so runs. They're all dedicated. I might be off, give or take one or two, be off one assigned versus unassigned, but that's Rick's baby, and he does a really good job managing that. So I don't even poke my head in there unless I'm asked. Unless it's some technical trucks or ELDs, install, trucks coming to our shop in New Jersey. That's when I really get up.
And then what about DPT Logistics? Is that the company that you use for running outside of FedEx?
Yep. So again, that was our original company. That's the one that made all the mistakes. It carries the burden of that. It's like, let's just say Done Peoples Trucking was crucified, right? So, and everything underneath it was their sins have been forgiven because Done Peoples Trucking has it all right? So, which is DPT Logistics. And so we had probably at one time when we had the 35 FedEx runs and we started, focusing and drilling down on what was productive. Those trucks kind of moved over to Done Peoples Trucking, and we had about 30 something, 35, almost 40 trucks over there. So at the height between both the companies, we probably had lost count between owned units and rentals and leases. We probably had 50, almost 60 trucks. And right around now, we probably have, dozen and a half in Done Peoples Trucking. We'll probably get that down to about 10, just to help focus on some of the other things that we want to do. And on the garbage side, we have 6 very specific roll-off trucks and 3 front-end trucks.
Interesting. So Darrius, you and Rick are 50-50 partners in the business. I've heard horror stories of people trying to work with business partners and it just falls apart. It's almost like a marriage in some ways. Now, obviously, the two of you knew each other very well because you worked closely together, it sounds like, as air marshals. Tell us a little bit about the kind of segregation of duties between the two of you. What are the things in the business that Rick tends to focus on versus what are the things that you tend to focus on?
Yeah, so luckily for us, early on, we kind of figured out who was strong in what. We didn't come into this and say, hey, you're going to do X, I'm going to do Y. We came into it and said, we're going to do everything together. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Some things I just cannot do. I just don't like doing them. My brain doesn't work that way and vice versa. I'll give you an example. We had to fire a guy on Christmas Eve. I couldn't do it. Rick was like, I'll do it. And I said, okay, I'll come with you in case he gets crazy. Rick just said, hey, this isn't working out. I'm going to need your keys. You're not driving tonight. And that was that. And I was like, damn, that was pretty easy. So yeah, I think for me, we knew early on who does what. Rick kind of focuses a lot on the sales, of course, a lot of the admin as it relates to FedEx. He used to do the payroll when we first started. He kind of handed that stuff off a while ago. And I kind of moved and gravitated towards the trucks, the people, for two reasons. A, I was handy and I had a pretty good understanding of it. And B, I would be near the yard a lot. So I'd be down at the FedEx yard 2-3 times a week because I drove past it every day. I'd be in the terminal dealing with the people because I drove past it every day. But when Rick started to really get into the FedEx space, that was his go-to. I didn't have to deal with the manager. I didn't have to deal with MMRs or missing miles and stuff like that. He was really good about getting into that part of the business really quickly.
So let's talk about some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. And coming from a place where you didn't know the fundamentals of the business, figuring it out step by step. I'm sure that you probably made some mistakes and that you probably had to learn some lessons the hard way. What are a few lessons that have really stuck with you along your road to success over the past 10 years?
So I don't think that this is I hate to say it, like someone asked me the other day, you guys, I got invited to another podcast and said, you should tell your story. Tell people the story's not over. It's so when I hear road to success, it's hard to even think that, we're successful because we're still in it, still fighting every day. All business is hard, right? Trucking is incredibly difficult. FedEx, for as easy as, Rick and Linehaul Solutions and FedEx makes it, it's still a difficult business, so there's a lot of moving pieces, less in FedEx than they are in OTR, but, we're still dealing with mistakes today. So with that being said, we grew too fast. We took on a bunch of stuff. We had a lot of overhead. We were operating in, 4, 5, 6 different, terminals. 3 in Pennsylvania, 2 in Jersey, 1 in Virginia, 1 in Maryland, Mississippi, Florida, and Ohio, and that was spread out like 35 something trucks. We were forced to put leasing tractors down there because we didn't have mechanics, so you got a full service lease on an unassigned run and the guy's not coming to work because he has no supervision. It's kind of easy to see how that run could be, not productive. So that was probably our biggest, I would say mistake because we learned a lot from it, but just growing too fast, trying to do too much. I mean, you're talking about 33-year-old guys who have a little bit of success. You're like, hey, you want more runs? Like, hell yeah, we want more runs, so here, take the runs. Okay. And then the runs aren't running. What are you doing? Well, we leased trucks for 3 years. What do we do with it? You got to do something.
So in episode number 8 of this podcast, I spoke with a guy named David Delgado, and really great interview. And, he described his attitude of growing in the line haul business of basically he will take any opportunity that FedEx would throw at him. He would show up if the manager was saying, this contractor just dropped the ball. We don't have anyone to drive this run tonight. Is there anyone who can take this run? He was always there to put his hand up, even if he had to drive the run personally. And he would always take them. Unassigned, assigned, didn't matter. He would always take them on. But it sounded like he had a very conscious strategy of doing that in a few specific terminals, that were at least within maybe a couple hours drive from where he was, which allowed him to build a team, establish a culture, and manage things a little bit more closely. Whereas you and Rick, from what I can gather from what you just talked about, you had a similar attitude. Give it to us. We'll take anything you got. Let's grow this thing. But maybe the mistake, well, you don't want to call it a mistake, and I think that's probably right not to call it a mistake, but the lesson that you learned is that it's very difficult to manage an organization that's just very spread thin, right? It's much better to have 5 trucks running out of one station than 5 trucks running out of 5 separate stations. And you were kind of headed in that sort of direction.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate. I mean, and again, we're talking, it's 100% accurate. And to be fair, even so, we sold those runs. Like, we made money on those runs. We made more money selling them than we did arguing. Let's just be clear, right? So, but we did take that money and fuel other runs. I can't think of one time really that we didn't sell a run and it automatically coincided with buying another business. I'm not going to get into our biggest win, but at some point when we write our book, we'll share that our biggest win. Actually, in my opinion, Rick might agree as well. It probably catapulted us in the Linehaul space in the terminal just by what we got, the points, the money we paid, the quality of the runs. I think we probably went from unassigned to dedicated through award through the terminal, for 1 or 2 runs. And then when we really got our juicy dedicated runs, we got them to a purchase. And it was a slamming deal for us. It was a great deal. Those deals wouldn't exist now. Back then, and maybe for him, Delgado, how he did it is probably similar to ours, but focusing on a certain region. Look, back then, like I said, that was the wild, wild west. You could go up to a terminal manager and buying pizzas, and you might get, a dedicated run for 3 months. I don't think that's happening anymore because they're sending people to jail for that shit. But there's probably a few people that should go to jail that I know for sure that were doing things they weren't supposed to do, or just were doing things outside of the agreement, or maybe not being nefarious or mean-spirited or trying to hurt you personally or your business, but there's things that were done or could done that had a material impact on your business. If you're supposed to get 500 miles a night and getting 400 miles a night, well, why? Contract says I'm supposed to get 500. Why am I getting 400? So if there's only 3 contractors assigned a domicile, but you go down there and you see 10 different contractor trucks operating on that domicile, why is that? Who's making that decision? Starts with the terminal manager. And if the terminal manager doesn't know, and the dispatchers are doing it, and the terminal manager knows his volume's getting covered, there's one terminal, I'm not going to say which one it is, they always have growth opportunities. But every time you go down there, there's 30 trucks down. And it's a small terminal. Someone's carrying it. Where are they coming from?
Darrius, what are some other lessons that you've learned along your path as a trucker?
Nothing, pay people every Friday, trucks break, old, new, expensive, cheap, they're going to break. Unfortunately, accidents happen. There's no such thing as a small accident. There's no small boo-boos. Someone takes a bumper off in the yard, okay, that's a small boo. But you're on the road, you're going 20 miles an hour and you hit someone, it's going to be bad. Someone's going to be hurt. The truck's going to be tore up. I've seen some of the worst damage done at low speed. Drivers parked, sleeping in a truck stop, and another trailer backs into the hood, rips the whole hood. Hood's $4,000. A light's $1,000. Gets a tow truck. If you get a bumper, it's $20,000, $30,000 right there, plus the labor. So there's no small accidents. You got to be safe. It sounds cliche, but me and Rick experienced a fatality under our authority. It wasn't pleasant. It took a year to wrap up. Thank God that we did everything right administratively. Our paperwork and the records were in order, and we survived.
One of the things I'd like to talk about, Darrius, is the fact that you are a FedEx contractor, but then you also have your own authority and you run trucks outside of FedEx. And most of the people who tune in and listen to this podcast are current FedEx contractors. And I see questions on various online forums frequently asking, should I get my own authority? If I want to run outside of FedEx, Do I need to get my own authority? Do I need to get my own insurance? Can I use the same company name? So why don't you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what made you want to get your own authority and start running outside of FedEx? It sounded like you got started in FedEx, you experienced some level of success, but at some point you decided to also branch out. What led to that decision?
We wanted more. Like I said, we were 30-something-year-old guys looking at the settlement and, fighting for unassigned miles during peak season. We started in November, fought for miles during peak season, and it was frustrating. Drivers sitting there at the dispatch window, 1:00 in the morning, saying, "Hey, I'm going home because there's no work." Guys getting 200 miles and the truck breaking. We said, "Look, there's got to be ways to make more money. We own these trucks. Let's figure it out." So I was telling my dad about it. He said, "Hey, just go get your own authority and DOT number and run the trucks." So then we found out how to walked into some rental place, gave them our story. They gave us a rental truck. Rick found someone to rent us a trailer. We took one of our first FedEx drivers and put him and another guy going to California and Texas with the load. And just started like that, And then we made, let's say, couple bucks, couple good gross numbers, just gross. And we said, "That's it. We're going to get more trucks over the road." And we did. We went and got 4 more trucks and 5 more trucks. So we had 3 trucks running in FedEx, 4 or 5 running outside of it. Big, gaudy, brand new trucks, lease tractors, rental trucks, 10, 12 cents a mile, 2,700 base, just insane, right? And the market crashed, similar to what's happening now, and Rick called a FedEx terminal manager. Again, this is the Wild Wild West. Said, "Hey, we got these trucks. You don't have work for them. Can you use them?" I said, "Sure. Bring them in. I'll put them right to work." We took 4 of those trucks, 4 of those drivers, processed them in FedEx, put the FedEx decals and tractor files in there. Boom. Now we got 7, 8 runs running in FedEx. And then that's when I said our next milestone was when we bought a business from a guy who was losing it. Great deal, great runs. It was probably a landmark sale for us, a purchase for us in our business. And I think after that, we were probably off and running. And shortly after that, they came up with the growth opportunities, online growth opportunities. And that's how we started really getting up there.
So for someone who's listening to this and thinking about, should I get my own authority and run outside of FedEx, what are some things that they should be thinking about? And can you compare and contrast the two?
So look, I would tell you the natural thing is you want to go back and forth. It makes sense. You should be able to. And there's a saying like, "Hey, it's simple, but it's not easy." You should be able to take your truck that you own and go run an Amazon or FedEx whenever you feel like it, right? But FedEx is smart. They have to move their packages. So they have availability levels and dedicated and assigned. So if you're out for 3 days going to California to Wichita, Kansas, and your number comes up on an assigned board, you can't get back fast enough. So, there's some of the things that I would tell people is just think about, some of the liability that one company or one side of the business is going to impact the other. So now you have tolls on one company, you have fuel on one side, you have liability insurance, physical damage insurance that may or may not be covered depending on where those trucks are running. You have workers' comp. If some people I found out have workers' comp in 1 or 2 states. But if a guy falls on the truck in Utah, what are you going to do? Tell him you're not covered? So there's a lot of stuff like that you have to figure out. And it's the biggest one is probably the invoicing. Again, simple but not easy. Hey, I carried this load, $100,000 of strawberries. You took it. You received it. But I can't get paid? Oh, well, you didn't have a signature on this piece of paper, but you got the strawberries. You got the fruit. It's in your doc. Well, I'm not paying you until you get the paperwork right. But I burn fuel, I burn payroll, I paid insurance, I paid truck payments. You got your strawberries, but I don't get paid. That is probably the single most frustrating thing in the entire trucking industry for me. And I think FedEx does a really good job of solving that. They're not perfect. FedEx owes us a ton of money. But again, that was from our oversight, us not knowing to catch, VMR miles or fuel surcharge. Again, what Rick has built and the education that he gives people, it sounds like a plug for Rick, but it is. I mean, the mistakes that we made and the negatives, the hits that we took, they were simple. They were dumb. They were stuff we should have caught, but we didn't know. We would never make those mistakes again. So what Rick does now is he tells the new or prospective contractor how not to make those mistakes. So, OTR versus FedEx, FedEx is a good thing when they're strong and they're giving out miles. But everything's cyclical, yeah.
Yeah, so the billing and getting paid, I feel like that's a big one. So if you are a contractor with FedEx, you can expect to get that money every Friday. It's coming every Friday. And that gives you, first of all, it just gives you a lot of consistency. It allows you to pay your people every Friday. And that you're likely to have enough money to actually make that happen because the money's coming in. You also don't have to put any energy or manpower into collections. And, for running outside of FedEx in the trucking industry, that is a whole piece of the business, which you have to put a lot of energy into. Is just because you finish the work, that doesn't mean that the money's automatically showing up in your account on Friday. You have to chase people a lot of times, it sounds like, to actually get paid. In fact, there is an entire financing industry. There are finance companies, where all they do is call trucking companies and say, okay, how much money is owed to you right now? Well, I'll give you 50% of that today. And then I get to try to collect on the full balance.
Yeah, give me a good one. Give me a good one. I got some money I want to collect. So, because at some point, you're just like, I'm not getting it. You're not going to pay me. You're making me jump through hoops. AR is down right now, but it can be high. Sometimes we would have 150K of AR out there, $50,000 of AR. We do a lot better job now and get a lot proactive at it. A lot more proactive. And what I tell people is, it's never the small loads. It's never the $900 load that a guy loses a piece of paper. It's always that $7,500 load. It's always, a 9K load. Has 10 pieces of paper. Driver gives you 9. They don't want to pay you because you don't have the 10th piece. It's a mess. It's a mess. Conversely, with the garbage company, there's almost no AR. I take a credit card before I leave my house. I don't deliver it, but there's almost no AR. It's all cash flow.
So you have to get your own authority. There's some pretty substantial insurance considerations that you need to take into account. Billing, collections, accounts receivable, those are other factors to consider if you're going to be running outside of FedEx as a trucker. Is there anything else? Anything else that is different about running outside of FedEx?
For us, it's easy. You can get a driver in quicker. You can qualify them quicker. It's your qualifications or your insurance carrier's qualifications. You can kind of control that a little more. There's no drivers holding people hostage at the run. Like, hey, you want me to show up? I need another $50. That was a thing. Drivers was bounced from company to company in FedEx like it was, you change your socks. We had a guy crash a truck for another contractor, hide it between two trailers, come to run with us the next night. And the manager was like, hey, this dude just crashed a truck. He can't work here. And I'm like, well, he shows active and available. Well, I'm telling you, we won't dispatch him. Okay, got it. So, that type of stuff is probably the biggest one. I think it's slightly easier to qualify a driver on the other side of the house, but you have no shortage of people who want to be dedicated basically Monday through Friday and be home every day.
So what about the difference of FedEx being drop and hook versus all of the other ways that you can go pick up freight? Is there more downtime for the driver where they're just sitting, not getting work in one or the other way of doing business?
Yeah, but through the years I've experienced, I'm not a driver. I never drove. So through the years, I think the sentiment's changed a little bit in how we pay people, flat rate or a mile, whatever's higher. Like we've kind of removed that whole go, go, go. I need to be a road warrior mentality. It was two things. Our Amazon contract, there was a lot of sitting and we got paid flat rate. We passed it on to the driver, and then also safety. We just got tired of guys rushing and hitting stuff. So we were able to do that for many, many years. Just have a flat rate or miles, whatever's higher. And then the drop and hook versus the sitting. Everybody wants to do drop and hook when it works, but if you get to your drop and there's no trailer available, what are you doing? You're sitting there anyway. Well, it's not ready. You have to wait for empties. It's still the same thing, whether you wait an hour or 3 hours, you're still waiting.
What about variance in revenue? Is there one model, FedEx versus everything else? Is there one model that is more consistent with revenue? Is there one model that you feel like has higher earning potential, but maybe higher variance, big months and down months?
It's FedEx by far. FedEx is there's no variance. If you run the runs, you get paid. If you don't run them, you're not getting paid. Every day we wake up on the other side of the house and we wonder, is someone going to get empty? Is someone going to get reloaded? Because those all impact, will they be able to have a run? Like today's Friday, right? If someone doesn't get empty today, they may sit there till Monday because they're not able to pick up another load. So a lot of stuff like that is the biggest determination for me and why FedEx is better most times. Yes.
And then something even more fundamental, which probably should have been my first question: how do you get work? If you go get your own authority, you get a truck. Where do you start? Do you just call companies that need things hauled and form relationships, or are there brokers you work with, or how do you start that
Some
process?
Some people do that, but I mean, there's brokers. We got lucky. We had a local contract out of South Jersey delivering fruit and produce direct to customers throughout Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, and Mass. So we did that for a while, and then we just believed, like, hey, there's got to be a way to make more money. Let's make calls. But I think trucking is like stocks, right? It's an opaque industry. It's not very transparent. Think about it. There's brokers for a reason. You have no idea what they're getting paid. So I think if you want work, yeah, sure, go to a broker, go to load boards, go to Amazon, go to Selectus, whatever is out there. Go to DAT, Internet Truck Stop. And you can get a good idea of what loads are paying today, but there's no guarantee they'll be there tomorrow. It could be up, it could be down. And right now, everything just happens to be down. And the weirdest thing about it is there's no shortage of volume. Our phone doesn't ring any less. It didn't ring any more when it was COVID. It is paid more. So, you hear about the whole supply chain issues and can't find drivers. For most years, that was never really our experience. I think we've always been able to find drivers, but now the drivers that we find, they just won't do certain things. Nope, I'm not doing that. Nope, not working Saturday. Nope, not driving that truck. Nope, not driving at night. Nope, not going to that state. Before it was, you paying me? I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Within reason. But now there's so many caveats to just what someone's willing to do. And the funny thing is, when we were in FedEx, that was like a daily, weekly battle. Managing these guys' personalities, managing their preferences. Guys almost getting into fist fights because they thought that was their truck. We never formally assigned a truck. So we just said, you know what? We're going to put all the trucks with the keys in them right there in the yard. And whoever comes work first, the early bird gets the work. And you have some guys who just, so-and-so took my truck. It's not your truck. You just drove it for a week. Well, it should be my truck. I cleaned it out. Yeah, but then you took a week off. And so-and-so needed it. So we didn't know when you were coming back to work. So those were the biggest fights that we used to have there, or going to Connecticut, or making an extra stop. There's no pups. I only want to take 53s. Or someone took it empty because they wanted to go home early when they should have waited for a load. But you can never underestimate a person's desire to please himself, right? Everybody's favorite person is himself. So I wasn't surprised by it. I just was frustrated how frequent it was. It was like clockwork. Every 3 months, can I get a raise? Every 3 months, guy going to another carrier. Once we got our truck situation sorted out, our maintenance, instead start having less breakdowns and stop negotiating on pay and just constantly hired, we had a lot better time on turnover. Turnover improved. We weren't guys weren't quitting as much. Once we started assigning trucks, breakdowns started happening less once we started assigning trucks. And we carried that over to both sides of our business. Don't negotiate, pay, the runs pay what they pay. Within reason, you have a good guy, is great, want $25, sure. But you would get guys coming in saying, well, this contract is paying me $300 more than what you're paying me. Can you match it? No, man, goodbye. See you.
Darrius, I want to be mindful of our time. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to talk about, or any other important lessons you've learned that you feel like other people tuning in and listening to this podcast would benefit from hearing?
No, FedEx is a great business if it's managed right. And when I say managed right, I mean your expectations. When Rick was first doing deals and selling stuff, I'd be at the table and selling our stuff, and we'd have meetings. And I would just hear everybody say the same thing. Oh, I want this to be passive. I'm going to hire a manager. I'm going to throw this thing to 100 trucks. I got some life left in me. I got access to capital. Everybody's a big shot with money, right? They get their runs, first breakdown, that shit goes out the window, man. I thought this was passive. What do you mean I have a blowout? Driver quit. What do we do? Hire more. So I think that managing your expectations and having some realistic expectations on profit margins and money and how you can control that, mainly keeping your hiring pool and your truck staffed is probably the biggest piece of advice I give to any potential FedEx contractor. If you can't figure it out, call Rick. He'll tell you how to do it.
That's great. I think that's a good place to sign off. Darrius, I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and lending us some of your time. I know that you're busy. You have 3 separate businesses that you're involved with, so I appreciate you being here with us. And it was good to talk to you for a bit. Routing for Success is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. In today's competitive market, it is essential to acquire the right trucks at a fair price and finance them in a way that makes sense for your business. Leveraging their extensive network of truck and van suppliers, the experts at AP Equipment Financing will help you locate the best deals on step vans, cutaways, panel vans, and more. Deliver them straight to your facility and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description or visit apfinancing.com for more information. Routing for Success is an independent production of AP Equipment Financing and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by FedEx Corporation, FedEx Ground, Amazon, or any other logistics company discussed herein. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Routing for Success.